Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back 1,000 years, not to a castle in Europe or a temple in Asia, but to a city of soil and sweat built right in the heart of North America. We're going to wander the plazas and climb the great earthen mounds of a forgotten metropolis called Cahokia. You'll be walking its paths, smelling the wood smoke on the humid air, and hearing the murmur of a language no one has spoken for centuries. As a heads up, given the complete lack of modern sanitation, or really any concept of germ theory, you probably wouldn't survive this visit for more than a week before succumbing to something spectacularly unpleasant. Luckily, you're just dreaming. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I love to see where you're all listening from, so feel free to post your city or town and what time it is for you in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is thick, so incredibly thick and wet, it feels less like air and more like something you have to push through. It's the deep, sultry humidity of an American summer, the kind that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel heavy and warm. You're walking on a well worn path, a simple dirt track packed down by centuries of bare feet. On either side of you, the floodplain forest is a riot of green. Towering cottonwoods, sycamores, and pecans create a dense canopy overhead, dappling the path in shifting patterns of sunlight and shadow. The air buzzes with the sound of insects, a constant, high pitched thrum that forms the baseline for everything else. The call of a distant bird, the rustle of something small in the undergrowth, the gentle whisper of wind through the leaves. For miles, it has been just this: you, the path, and the overwhelming, untamed nature of the Mississippi River Valley. But now, things are starting to change. The path is wider, and you're seeing other people with increasing frequency. Small family groups pass you, heading the other way, carrying empty baskets. A man with a long spear over his shoulder gives you a silent nod, his face impassive. You notice the forest isn't quite so wild anymore. There are patches that have been deliberately cleared, with young saplings growing in neat, orderly lines. You see evidence of managed fires designed to clear brush and encourage the growth of the nut bearing trees that are so vital to the local diet. You are entering the orbit of a great power, a place that can shape the very landscape for miles around it. The low thrum of insects is now joined by a new sound, a low hum that is almost too deep to be a sound at all. It's more of a feeling, a vibration in the soles of your feet and in the bones of your chest. It's the sound of thousands of people. The smell of wood smoke, once a faint and intermittent scent, is now a constant presence in the air, rich and earthy. And then you emerge from a dense grove of trees into a clearing, and your breath catches in your throat. Before you, stretching across the flat, green floodplain, is a city. But it's a city unlike any you could have imagined. There are no soaring stone towers, no crenellated walls of brick. Instead, the skyline is dominated by dozens of enormous, man made hills of earth. These are mounds. Some are conical, like perfect rounded hills. Others are long and rectangular, like giant earthen platforms. And in the distance, one of them, impossibly huge, rises in four great terraces toward the sky, a man made mountain that dwarfs everything around it. This is Cahokia. At its peak, around the year 1100 AD, this was the largest and most influential city north of the great civilizations of Mexico, a sprawling urban center that was home to more people than London at the time. You are looking at the work of tens of thousands of people over hundreds of years, a testament to a society of incredible complexity and power. You try to wrap your mind around the logistics, the sheer number of baskets of soil dug by hand with stone and wooden tools that had to be carried to build even the smallest of these structures. As you stand there, just taking it all in, a small group of traders passes by, their woven backpacks bulging with goods. They glance at you, their faces decorated with fine red and white lines. They speak to each other in low, melodic tones, a language that sounds completely alien. And it strikes you that the name we use for this place, Cahokia, is an anachronism. It's the name of a much later tribe, one of the many who lived in the area long after this great city had been abandoned. Historians and archaeologists have no idea what the people who built this place actually called it. Their name for their home, for this incredible achievement of civilization, has vanished into the earth, just like the people themselves. It's a humbling thought to stand at the gates of a great city that has forgotten its own name. You look out over the fields of maize that surround the mounds, at the scattered clusters of houses with smoke curling from the smoke holes in their thatched roofs. You see the sheer scale of the operation, the obvious planning in the layout of the mounds and plazas, and you wonder about the nature of the power that holds it all together. Historians still argue whether Cahokia was a true state, with a formal government, a standing army, and a codified system of laws, or if it was what they call a complex chiefdom, a vast collection of towns and villages held together by fealty to a single, immensely powerful, semi divine ruler. To you, standing here on the outskirts, the academic distinction seems meaningless. Whatever you call it, it is powerful, it is organized, and it is, in this moment, the center of the world. You take a deep breath of the thick, smoky air and begin your walk forward towards the river that separates these outlying settlements from the city's sacred heart. The path becomes more congested as you draw nearer to the water, a slow moving river of people flowing towards the bank. The air, still thick with that signature Cahokian wood smoke you first smelled miles ago, is now also tinged with the damp, earthy scent of the river itself, the smell of wet mud, decaying leaves, and fish. You arrive at a bustling, chaotic scene that could generously be described as a ferry landing. There are no piers, no neat lines, just a muddy bank where dozens of long, heavy looking boats are pulled ashore. People are everywhere, shouting to one another over the din, loading and unloading goods. A man hefts a massive bundle of reeds onto his shoulder, while a woman negotiates loudly with a boatman, gesturing at a wicker cage full of disgruntled looking turkeys. This is clearly a major transit point. the ancient equivalent of a busy bus station, only much, much muddier. The boats themselves are remarkable. They are dugout canoes, but that term feels inadequate for these colossal vessels. Each one has been crafted from a single massive tree trunk, most likely a cottonwood or cypress, felled and then painstakingly hollowed out using a controlled combination of fire and scraping with stone adzes. You can see the dark, hardened texture of the wood, a testament to the fire that gave it shape and strength. Some of these canoes are easily 40 or 50 feet long, capable of holding a dozen people and a significant amount of cargo. It's an incredible feat of engineering, accomplished without metal tools, powered by nothing more than raw manpower and generations of accumulated knowledge. You try to imagine the effort, the months of labor required to create just one. There's no quick trip to the hardware store for a new router bit here. Every inch is hard won. You need to get across, so you approach a man who seems to be in charge of one of the larger canoes. He's lean and muscular, his bare back covered in intricate swirling tattoos that ripple as he moves. There's no posted schedule, no ticket booth. You communicate with a combination of gestures and hope, pointing across the water to the towering mounds on the other side. He seems to understand, sizing you up for a moment before giving a short, sharp nod and gesturing for you to get in. You clamber over the high, rounded edge, your foot landing with a thud on the bottom of the boat. It feels surprisingly stable for its shape, but it still wobbles enough to make you freeze for a second. You find a space on a simple wooden plank set across the canoe's width, wedged between a silent old woman holding a large sealed pottery jar and a young boy trying to keep a small, very fluffy dog from licking everyone. With a final shout and a great push from a pole, the canoe slides away from the bank and into the current. Out on the water, the perspective shifts dramatically. The noise of the landing fades behind you, replaced by the rhythmic splash of paddles dipping into the brown, murky water. The river is wide and powerful, its surface deceptively calm, but its current strong and deep. From here, the city you are approaching but looks even more majestic. The great mountain of earth you saw from a distance, the one they call Monk's Mound, now completely dominates the horizon, a symbol of absolute authority. The wind picks up over the water, offering a brief, welcome respite from the oppressive humidity. You realize this river isn't a boundary or an obstacle, it's a highway. It is the city's lifeblood, a massive artery connecting this place to a continent. It's their version of the internet, a conduit for goods, people, and most importantly, ideas. As your boatman expertly navigates the currents, you see other canoes, big and small, plying the waters. Some are local traffic, like yours, but others look different, perhaps carrying traders from communities hundreds of miles up or downriver. You see a vessel loaded with heavy, dark stones that you don't recognize, and another carrying bundles of what looks like glimmering copper. This aquatic superhighway is what made Cahokia possible, allowing it to draw resources and tribute from a vast and diverse area. And it makes you wonder about the nature of that influence. Archaeologists and historians still argue about the nature of Cahokia's influence along this great river. Was this the heart of a coercive empire, with political agents and soldiers sent out to enforce its will and spread its state sponsored religion? Or was it more of a cultural phenomenon, a place so successful and prestigious that other towns and chiefdoms simply chose to copy its pottery styles, its religious symbols, and its practice of mound building to boost their own status? The truth is probably a complex mix of both, a blend of hard and soft power that we can now only guess at. The canoe begins to angle towards the far shore. The city's sounds, which had been a general hum, now resolve into individual noises. The rhythmic thump thump of someone pounding corn into meal, the high pitched shouts of children playing a game, the sharp bark of a dog. You can make out the details of the houses clustered near the riverbank and see the imposing height of the wooden palisade wall that encircles the city's core. The canoe bumps gently against the soft, muddy bank on the other side. The journey is over. The brief moment of peace on the water is broken as everyone begins to move, grabbing their belongings and climbing out onto the shore. You step out of the dugout, your feet sinking into the rich, dark earth. You have crossed the river. You are now inside the very heart of the great metropolis of Cahokia. You pull your feet from the sticky, clinging mud of the riverbank, leaving the noise and bustle of the landing behind you. The path here is wider and slopes gently upward, away from the water. The dense clusters of thatched roof houses seem to part before you, and you walk through a narrow gap between two small, rounded mounds. And then you stop. The world opens up. You are standing at the edge of an immense, perfectly flat, and almost entirely empty expanse of land. You have entered the Grand Plaza. The sheer scale of it is difficult to process. It is a vast, man made clearing that stretches out before you, so wide that the people walking on the far side are just tiny, moving specks. To your left, the colossal form of Monk's Mound rises like a tidal wave of earth, its presence more overwhelming than ever. The plaza is bordered on all sides by other mounds, more than a dozen of them, sitting like silent, watchful guardians around this sacred space. Your mind immediately understands that this is not a natural feature. Nature does not create such perfect, sweeping rectangles of level ground in a floodplain. This is an engineering marvel. This plaza, covering nearly 50 acres, an area you could cram about 40 modern football fields into, was meticulously planned and executed. The Cahokians moved a staggering amount of earth, shaving the tops off of high spots and hauling basket after basket of soil to fill in low-lying gullies, all to create this impossibly grand level stage. It's a stunning declaration of power, a society literally moving mountains, or at least very large hills, to shape the world to its will. You take a few steps forward, out into the open. The ground beneath your feet feels different. It's not the soft, loamy earth of the forest or the squelching mud of the river. It's firm, smooth, and resilient, almost like a modern clay tennis court. And you notice something else. It's clean, incredibly clean. There are no weeds, no piles of refuse, not even a significant scattering of leaves, despite the thousands of surrounding trees. This is one of those little details that reveals so much. Archaeologists have discovered that this wasn't just dirt. The plaza's surface was a carefully constructed feature made of different types and colors of sand and clay, laid in layers and packed down to create a durable, smooth floor. Keeping a 50-acre public space this immaculate without leaf blowers or street sweeping machines would have required a dedicated, full time workforce. You can almost imagine them, a crew with handmade brooms, fanning out at dawn every single day to meticulously sweep the plaza, a task of almost religious devotion. It's the kind of obsessive tidiness you see in places of great power or deep reverence. The sensory experience of being here is profound. The sun beats down relentlessly, with no shade to offer relief. The ambient sounds of the city, the distant pounding, the dogs, the voices, seem to travel differently here, echoing slightly across the open expanse. It creates a strange combination of immersion and isolation. You are at the very center of the city's life, yet you feel completely exposed and alone. And it makes you wonder, what exactly was this magnificent, empty space for? It's a question that still sparks considerable discussion. Archaeologists and historians still argue about the plaza's primary function. Was this a massive, open air market, the commercial heart of the empire, where goods from the Gulf Coast to the Great Lakes were bartered and traded? Was it a sacred parade ground for religious ceremonies, where the entire population could gather to watch rituals performed by the chief atop Monk's Mound, a direct link between the people and their gods? Or was it a grand arena for the city defining sport of chunky, where high stakes games decided fortunes and perhaps even political fates? The most likely answer is that it was all of these things, a vast, flexible stage that could be adapted for whatever purpose the city's rulers required. Even now, during what seems to be a normal day, the plaza is not entirely still. You see a line of men, their bodies painted with white clay, jogging in perfect formation across the space, perhaps warriors in training, a small, solemn procession of what you take to be priests, distinguished by their feathered cloaks and heavy shell necklaces, makes its way from one of the smaller mounds towards the great stairway leading up Monk's Mound. They walk with a slow, deliberate pace, utterly indifferent to your presence. To them, you are just as part of the scenery. This entire environment, you realize, is a carefully constructed piece of psychological theater. Standing here in the open, surrounded by the homes of the gods and the elite, under the watchful gaze of the supreme ruler on his man made mountain, is designed to make you feel small. It's a constant, silent reminder of your place in the universe, a universe with them at the top, and you, a tiny figure on their grand, clean floor at the bottom. It is awe inspiring, yes, but it is also deeply intimidating. Your eyes, and indeed the eyes of everyone in this vast, open plaza, are inevitably drawn in one direction north. Standing at the head of the plaza, presiding over the entire city, is the structure you've been seeing in glimpses and from a distance since you first arrived. Now, facing it directly, its true scale is finally settling in, and it is absolutely staggering. This is Monk's Mound. It is less a mound and more a man made mountain, a four-tiered behemoth of earth that seems to hold up the sky itself. Its base is immense, covering over 14 acres, a footprint larger than that of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. You are looking at the single largest prehistoric earthwork in all of the Americas, and it is a monument to pure, unadulterated human will. You try to comprehend the labor involved. Archaeologists estimate that this one structure contains over 22 million cubic feet of soil, every single clod of it dug with a stone or clamshell hoe, packed into a woven basket, carried on someone's back up the slope, and carefully dumped and tamped down into place. It wasn't built in a single go, but in at least 14 distinct construction stages over a period of about 300 years. Generation after generation of Cahokians dedicated their lives to building this monument for their ruler, their God on earth. It's a construction project on a scale that is hard for a modern mind to grasp, a feat of logistics, engineering, and social control that rivals any wonder of the ancient world. You could fill thousands of modern dump trucks with the earth it took to build this, and here it was all done by hand. Your gaze travels up the four distinct terraces. The first and lowest terrace, which spreads out before you like a giant stage, is still bigger than most of the other mounds in the city. Above that, three more levels rise in succession, each one smaller than the last, culminating in a flat, rectangular summit 100 feet above the plaza floor. From this distance, you can see a massive building crowning that summit. It's a wooden structure, but its size is immense, perhaps over 100 feet long and 50 feet wide. This was the pinnacle of power, the residence of the paramount chief, the most sacred and politically important building in the entire civilization. It was from that spot that a single individual ruled over a city of thousands and held influence over a territory that spanned the length of the continent. There's a quiet irony in the name we use for this place. The name Monk's Mound has absolutely nothing to do with the Mississippian people who built it. The name is a historical footnote left by a small community of French Trappist monks who arrived in the area in the early 1800s, 700 years after the city's peak. They built a small settlement on one of the smaller nearby mounds and, seeing the wide, flat terraces of the Great Mound, decided it was the perfect place to plant their vegetable gardens. It's a strange, almost comical image, this titanic symbol of absolute centralized power, this platform for a god king, eventually becoming a quiet, contemplative patch for growing carrots and beans. From your position on the plaza floor, you look up at that distant summit and wonder about the building that once stood there. What was its true purpose? Archaeologists and historians still argue about the precise function of the great structure that crowned the summit. Was it simply a palace, a luxurious residence where the chief and his family lived a life of unimaginable privilege, physically and metaphorically elevated above everyone else? Was it a temple, a place of solemn ritual where the most important religious ceremonies were conducted, hidden from the eyes of the common folk below? Or was it a council house, a seat of government where the chief met with lesser nobles and the leaders of vassal towns to dispense justice and plan policy? In all likelihood, it was all three at once. In a society like Cahokia, the concepts of politics, religion, and personal life for the ruler would have been inextricably intertwined. The building wasn't just a house or a temple, it was the command center for the entire Cahokian world. The psychological effect of the mound is overwhelming. It is the ultimate expression of a social hierarchy. The grand staircase, a massive log stairway that would have ascended the northern face directly from the plaza, was a path few would ever be permitted to climb. To stand on the summit was to have a panoramic view of the entire city and its surrounding farmlands. The ruler could see everything. But for you, for the tens of thousands of people living and working below, you could only ever see the mound. It was a constant, looming reminder of the gods, the power of the chief, and your own small place in the grand order of things. It's not just a building, it's a statement written in earth that some people are destined to live closer to the sun. It's one thing to be a tourist, an anonymous observer standing in the vast, open grandeur of the city's heart. It's another thing entirely to live here. You turn your back on the intimidating, grassy face of Monk's Mound and the overwhelming scale of the Grand Plaza. The feeling of being a tiny, insignificant spectator begins to fade as you walk away from the monumental core, heading west towards the maze of houses where the city's thousands of ordinary people live out their days. The path narrows almost immediately, winding between the windowless, earthen walls of other people's homes. The sky, which was a huge open bowl in the plaza, is now just a sliver of blue seen between the high peaked grassy roofs. The sounds change too. The echoing silence of the plaza is replaced by the immediate, intimate noises of daily life. The rhythmic scrape of a stone hoe against a patch of dirt, the murmur of voices from inside a nearby house, the sharp yelp of a dog, the fussing cry of a baby. You have arrived in a residential neighborhood, a dense cluster of simple rectangular houses. They all look remarkably similar, a testament to a standardized and efficient building method perfected over generations. This is where you will find your home for this journey. You stop before a modest, sturdy looking structure. It's not a log cabin, nor is it a teepee or a wigwam. This is a classic Mississippian wattle and daub house. Its framework began as a shallow, rectangular trench dug into the earth. Into this trench, thick vertical posts of hickory or oak were set, forming the home's skeleton. Then, thinner, more flexible saplings and river cane were woven horizontally between the posts, creating a kind of dense, basket like wall, the wattle. Finally, this woven frame was plastered, inside and out, with a thick coating of daub, a sticky mixture of local clay, water, and dried prairie grass for temper. The result is a surprisingly durable, insulated wall with a rough, earthy texture, the color of the pale brown clay from the riverbanks. The roof is a high, steep peak, thatched with thick bundles of prairie grass, designed to shed the heavy summer rains and keep the interior dry. You approach the low doorway, the only opening in the walls besides a small smoke hole in the roof. You have to duck your head to enter, and as you step through, your foot doesn't land on a level floor. It steps down. You find yourself in a space that is partially subterranean, the floor having been dug out a foot or two below the exterior ground level. This is a clever and subtle piece of prehistoric climate control. On a blazing hot summer day like today, this sunken floor makes the interior noticeably cooler than the sweltering world outside. In the biting cold of winter, this same design would use the Earth's natural insulation to help keep the space warm. It's a simple, elegant solution to the region's extreme temperatures, a feature you'd never notice from the outside. Your eyes slowly adjust to the dim, smoky light. The interior is a single, rectangular room. The air is thick with the lingering scent of old wood smoke from the central fire pit, a shallow, clay lined depression in the middle of the floor. There is no furniture as you know it. Against one wall, you see several woven reed mats that serve as both bedding for sleeping and cushions for sitting. In a corner, a collection of pottery vessels, globular jars for storing water, wide bowls for cooking and eating, are neatly stacked. A few finely woven baskets hang from the wooden ceiling rafters, likely holding dried corn, nuts, or personal belongings, keeping them safe from pests. It is sparse, functional, and intensely private, yet also completely open. There are no interior walls, no separate rooms. Life here is a communal affair, lived together in this one shared space. Forget an open concept floor plan. This is an open concept life. Looking back out the doorway, you see how closely the houses are packed together, often arranged in small clusters around a shared central courtyard. This layout wasn't random. Archaeologists and historians still argue about how these neighborhoods were organized. Were these clusters based on kinship, with extended family groups, a grandmother, her daughters, and their families, all living together in a compound? This seems likely in a society believed to be matrilineal, or was the organization based on craft, creating specialized districts within the city? A potter's quarter, a flint knapper's district, a neighborhood of weavers. Perhaps it was a combination of both. Whatever the system, the layout implies a deeply structured community, a city built of interconnected, organized cells rather than a chaotic sprawl. You are not just a resident of Cahokia, you are a member of a specific neighborhood, your identity tied to the people living in the smoky, earth-walled houses all around you. You are home. The first hint of morning isn't a sight, but a sound. Long before the sun has a chance to climb over the great earthen mounds to the east, the city begins to stir. You awaken on your woven reed mat, not to the jarring sound of an alarm, but to a gradually building symphony of domestic life. First, it's the dogs. A single bark from a nearby house is answered by another, and then another, a cascading chain of calls echoing through the neighborhood. Then comes the soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of a neighbor who is already awake, using a heavy wooden pestle to pound dried corn into meal in a hollowed out log mortar. A baby begins to cry somewhere nearby, a thin, insistent wail. From outside your simple wattle and daub house, you can hear the low murmur of voices as the family next door begins their day. The world is waking up, and there's no option to hit the snooze button. You push yourself up, your back feeling the effects of a night spent on a firm, unyielding surface. There's no memory foam in the Mississippian era. The air inside the semi subterranean house is cool and still, carrying the faint, smoky scent of last night's fire. The darkness is starting to fade, with a soft gray light filtering down through the smoke hole in the center of the thatched roof. The first and most essential task of the day awaits, rekindling the fire. You crawl to the central hearth, a shallow, clay lined pit in the middle of the floor. Last night, before sleep, the embers were carefully covered with a thick layer of ash to preserve them. You gently scrape away the ash, revealing a few tiny, glowing orange sparks. Cupping a handful of dried grass and tiny twigs around them, you blow gently, patiently, until a small, tentative flame flickers to life. This small fire is the heart of the home, the source of warmth, the only light in the darkness, and the engine for the day's first meal. And that meal, like most meals here, is centered around one sacred, life giving ingredient: maize. Corn is the undisputed king of the Cahokian diet, the caloric foundation upon which this entire civilization is built. There is no elaborate breakfast spread. You take a coarse, gritty flour, already pounded from sun dried kernels, and mix it with water in a simple, round bottomed pottery bowl. The mixture is a thick, pale paste. This bowl is then nestled directly into the warm embers of the newly revived fire, its contents slowly heating through. The result is a thick, bubbling porridge, a form of hominy or grits that is bland, heavy, and incredibly filling. It is the fuel for a day of hard, physical labor, a meal of pure functions over form. There is no coffee to sharpen your senses, no sweet pastry to delight your palate. There is only the porridge, today, tomorrow, and for most of the days of your life. Of course, to make porridge, you need water. You take a clay jar, its surface cool to the touch, and step out of the dim house into the growing light of dawn. The neighborhood is alive now, with people moving purposefully along the narrow paths. Where does the water for a city of thousands come from? It's a critical question, and one that archaeologists and historians still argue about. The nearby creeks and channels of the Mississippi were convenient, but they were almost certainly contaminated with the waste of the dense population, a recipe for disease. Was it from carefully constructed ponds and reservoirs designed to hold rainwater, or perhaps more likely, did they dig deep wells within the neighborhoods, tapping into the cleaner groundwater that lay beneath the sandy soil? You follow a path to what looks like a communal well, a stone lined pit from which people are hauling up water in pottery jars tied to ropes. It is a hub of quiet morning activity, a place for a brief, sleepy exchange with your neighbors as you all collect the day's most vital resource. Back in the house, with the porridge now warm, you perform your morning ablutions. It's a simple affair, a splash of the cool well water on your face. But there is one surprising, humanizing detail of self-care. While a diet heavy in starchy maize was hard on the teeth, the people of Cahokia didn't just let them rot. After finishing your share of the gritty porridge, perhaps scooped from the communal bowl with a spoon made from a river mussel shell, you might reach for a small, pointed twig. Evidence of grooves on the teeth of skeletons found here suggests that these people regularly used implements, prehistoric toothpicks, to clean between their teeth. It's a small, intimate act, a recognition that even in a world without dentists, taking care of your body was a daily ritual. It's a quiet moment of order before the day's work begins. Fueled by the corn, you are now ready. The sun is climbing higher, and the vast fields and busy workshops await. With the heavy, sustaining porridge sitting in your stomach, you step out into the full light of morning and join the river of people flowing out from the residential districts. You are heading for work. The path takes you away from the city's heart, past the last of the houses and workshops, towards the open land that surrounds the urban core. The air changes again. The smoky, domestic scent of the neighborhoods gives way to the fresh, green smell of growing things and rich, sun warmed earth. Before you lies the true source of Cahokia's power, the engine that fueled the creation of the mounds, fed the armies, and financed the entire civilization. It is a seemingly endless sea of green. You are standing in the edge of the city's agricultural fields, a vast and intricate patchwork of cultivation that stretches for miles in every direction, covering the fertile floodplain of the American bottom. This is not simple gardening. This is agriculture on an almost industrial scale for the era. The sight of it, the sheer, organized immensity of it all, is as impressive as the great mounds themselves. This sprawling metropolis, with its thousands of citizens and its monumental public works, was only made possible by a revolution that took place in these very fields a century or two before. The mainstream adoption of a new, incredibly productive variety of maize, corn, allowed the Cahokians to generate a massive food surplus for the first time in this region's history. That surplus was the key that unlocked everything. It meant not everyone had to spend their days producing food. It freed up thousands of people to become specialists. The builders who carried the baskets of earth up Monk's Mound, the artisans who crafted the fine pottery, the priests who charted the sun, and the elite class who governed it all. The city quite literally grew us out of these fields of corn. You walk down a narrow path between the plots, and the work is already well underway. There are no plows here, no oxen or horses to pull them. All the work is done by human muscle. The primary tool you see is the stone-bladed hoe. It's a simple but effective implement, with a carefully chipped, sharpened piece of chert, a type of flint, hafted onto a sturdy wooden handle. You watch the people as they work, men and women, young and old. They move with a steady, practiced rhythm, swinging the heavy hoes to break up the soil, chop away persistent weeds, and mound the earth around the base of the corn stalks. The sun is climbing higher, beating down on their bare backs. It is grueling, repetitive, back-breaking labor that begins at dawn and ends at dusk, day after day, all through the long, hot, humid summer. The porridge in your belly suddenly feels less like a simple meal and more like the minimum energy requirement for this relentless toil. Looking closer, you see that these fields are more complex than just a monoculture of corn. The Cahokians were masters of a sustainable agricultural system we now call the Three Sisters. You see tough, climbing bean vines using the sturdy corn stalks as natural trellises, winding their way up towards the sun. In the shade cast by the corn and beans, broad-leafed squash plants sprawl across the ground, their large leaves acting as a living mulch that suppresses weeds and helps the soil retain its precious moisture. It's a symbiotic partnership. The corn provides support, the beans fix nitrogen in the soil to fertilize the corn, and the squash provides protection. But there are other, stranger plants here too, remnants of an older agricultural tradition. You see plots of what a modern person might call weeds. Things like knotweed, goosefoot, a relative of quinoa, and a grain called maygrass. These were the original domesticated crops of the region, the staples of the Eastern agricultural complex, and they are still grown here, a vital and nutritious supplement to the big three. You watch the hundreds of people working, all seemingly engaged in the same task, and it begs a fundamental question about their society. How was all this labor, this entire agricultural machine, actually organized? It is a topic that archaeologists and historians still argue about. Was this a truly communal effort, with everyone working on land that ultimately belonged to the paramount chief? In that system, the chief's agents would collect the entire harvest and then redistribute it back to the populace, keeping a large portion to feed his family, his retainers, and the craft specialists, and to store for ceremonies or famine. This would have placed immense power in his hands. Or was the land divided into plots that were controlled by individual families or kin groups? In that scenario, you would work your own family's plot, and a portion of your harvest would be paid to the chief as tribute, like a form of taxation. It's the difference between being a state controlled farmhand and being a subsistence farmer with a tax bill. We don't know the answer, but the sheer scale of the operation suggests a high degree of central control. The greatness of Cahokia was built on the backs of these farmers, and the porridge they ate was just the first return on their investment of sweat and toil. The sun is beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the endless fields of corn. The day of toil is ending, and you turn away from the sea of green, joining the quiet, weary procession of farmers heading back toward the city. Your muscles ache, and your mind is filled with the simple, repetitive rhythm of the work. As you draw closer to the urban core, leaving the outlying farmsteads and workshops behind, a new feature dominates the landscape, one that wasn't as apparent when you were inside it. It's a wall, a colossal, formidable barrier of wood that separates the sacred heart of the city from the sprawling residential areas where you and thousands of others live. This is the Great Palisade. You approach this immense wooden curtain, and it seems to go on forever in either direction. This is no simple fence. It is a defensive wall 2 miles in length, a continuous line of upright timber that encircles the city's most important real estate, including the Grand Plaza, Monk's Mound, and about 17 smaller mounds. Archaeologists estimate that it was constructed from as many as 20,000 massive oak and hickory logs, each one a foot in diameter and soaring 15 to 20 feet into the air. The logs are set deep into the earth in a trench and stand shoulder to shoulder, creating a solid, impenetrable barrier. The sheer amount of lumber required is staggering. Its construction would have stripped the forests for miles around. and this was not a one-time effort. The evidence shows that this entire 2 mile long structure was so vital to the city that it was completely dismantled and rebuilt on at least three separate occasions during Cahokia's history. It's a monumental undertaking, a clear sign that security and separation were of paramount importance to the city's rulers. As you follow the wall's perimeter, you notice a distinct and clever feature in its design. Every 70 feet or so, the wall juts sharply outward to form a square tower or platform. These are bastions, and they transform the wall from a passive barrier into an active defensive system. From atop one of these platforms, archers would have a clear line of fire, not just outwards, but also down along the face of the main wall. Any enemy foolish enough to try and scale the palisade would find themselves caught in a deadly crossfire from multiple angles. But these bastions were likely more than just military architecture. In times of peace, you can imagine sentries standing watch on them, their feathered cloaks or painted bodies serving as a constant, visible reminder of the chief's authority. They were platforms for surveillance and for ritual display, turning the entire wall into a stage for projecting power. It's the ancient equivalent of putting a police officer on every street corner. You finally reach one of the gateways, a controlled funnel through which all traffic must pass. It's not a simple opening, but a baffled entrance, forcing you to make a sharp turn, a design intended to break the momentum of any attacking force and create a fatal choke point. There are guards here, lean men carrying long spears, their faces impassive as they watch the weary farmers file through. Passing through the gate is like crossing a border. The atmosphere instantly changes. The noise and chaotic energy of the outer city fall away, and you are once again in the quieter, more orderly, and sacred space of the central precinct. But the very existence of this wall, this clear line of separation, raises a crucial question. What was it truly for? It is a subject that historians and archaeologists still argue intensely about. The most obvious answer is defense. The bastions, the sheer height and strength of the wall, all point to a fear of external enemies. But if so, who were they? And why was the wall built relatively late in the city's history, after it was already a dominant power? Furthermore, why did it only protect the central core and the elite, leaving the vast majority of the population, the farmers and commoners, to fend for themselves outside? This leads to the other compelling theory that the wall was less about military defense and more about social control. It was a stark, physical manifestation of the gulf between the ruling class and the common people. It was a tool for managing crowds during major ceremonies and a daily, unavoidable reminder to the thousands living outside that they were separate from the sacred power that resided within. The wall wasn't just built to keep enemies out. It may have also been built to keep the city's own populace in their proper place. It's the ultimate gated community, separating the 1% from everyone else. For you, a simple farmer, it is a barrier that defines your world, separating the sweat of your daily life from the mystery and authority that govern it from their protected perch on the man-made mountains within. You leave the imposing shadow of the great palisade behind, the feeling of being in a sacred, controlled space receding as you venture back into the more familiar maze of residential neighborhoods. But this area feels different from the one you left this morning. There's a different quality to the air. Instead of the green, growing smell of gardens and cornfields, here you can detect the distinct, earthy scent of damp clay and the sharp, acrid smell of heavy wood smoke from a specialized fire. The ground underfoot is littered with small, sharp edged fragments of broken pottery. You have wandered into a craft district, a neighborhood of artisans. You pause before the open front of one of the wattle and daub houses. Inside, it is not set up for sleeping or domestic life. It is a workshop, and a master potter is at work, their body moving with the easy, repetitive grace of someone who has performed the same task 10,000 times. There is no hum of machinery, no potter's wheel spinning hypnotically. That technology is unknown here. Every single beautiful and useful vessel in this city is built entirely by hand. The potter, a woman with strong, clay caked hands, sits on a woven mat before a large, flat stone. On it rests a lump of gray, pliable clay harvested from the rich deposits along the riverbank. As she begins to knead the clay, pushing and folding it to work out any air bubbles, she adds a handful of a coarse white powder from a nearby bowl. This is the temper, a strengthening agent that will keep the pot from cracking when it faces the intense heat of the fire. And the temper of choice here, a signature of Mississippian pottery, is crushed mussel shell, painstakingly collected from the river, baked until brittle, and then pounded into a grit. It's a perfect illustration of the local genius, using one resource from the river to process another. Once the clay is prepared, the true artistry begins. The potter pinches off a piece of the tempered clay and rolls it between her palms and the stone, creating a long, even, snake like coil. She takes this coil and forms it into a ring, which will become the base of the pot. Then she rolls another coil, and another, and another. She stacks them one on top of the other, pinching the soft clay of the new coil into the one below it, slowly, patiently, building the walls of the vessel upward in a perfect spiral. Her hands are the wheel, her fingers and thumbs, moving with incredible precision, are the tools that shape the pot, making it swell outwards for the body and curve and inwards for the neck. It is a slow, methodical process that seems almost magical in its ability to create a symmetrical, graceful form from nothing but ropes of mud. Once the basic shape is formed, she uses a curved piece of gourd to scrape the exterior and a smooth gray river stone to burnish the interior, her hands moving in concert, one inside and one out, erasing the lines of the coils until the walls are perfectly seamless and smooth. The potter sets aside the finished form to dry to a leather hard state and picks up another vessel, one made earlier. This one has already been coated in a fine liquid clay slip and polished to a dull sheen. Now, the decoration starts. This is the hallmark of high status Cahokian pottery, a style archaeologists call Ramey incised. She takes a sharp, pointed tool, perhaps a splinter of bone or a carved piece of wood, and with a steady hand begins to etch intricate designs into the pot's dark gray shoulder. You see a swirling scroll that seems to evoke the wind or a whirlpool in the great river. Next to it, a series of sharp, nested chevrons, like the feathers on an arrow or a stylized bird in flight. These are not hesitant, scratchy marks. They are bold, confident, and deeply symbolic. But what do they symbolize? It's a mystery that endures to this day. Archaeologists and art historians still argue about the meaning of these powerful symbols. Are they merely decorative, a fashionable pattern that identified the pot as a product of a certain workshop or a specific time period? Or are they something much more profound? Do they represent core concepts of the Mississippian cosmos, the upper world, the lower world, the sun, and the serpent? Could they be narrative, telling the story of a hero or a myth, a form of picture writing that was understood across dozens of different cultures who traded for these pots? The intense focus on the potter's face suggests these are not just pretty pictures, they have a meaning and a power that she understands intimately. The final transformation happens in the fire. The decorated pots are not placed in a sophisticated, enclosed kiln. They are fired in a simple pit. But to achieve the iconic, polished black surface, a special trick is employed. As the fire reaches its peak temperature, the potter smothers the entire pit with green leaves, damp moss, and other organic material. This chokes the fire of oxygen, creating a smoky, carbon rich atmosphere. It is this reduction process that turns the iron bearing clay from red or brown to a deep, lustrous black. You look at a finished piece that has been set out to cool. It is beautiful, a perfect synthesis of form and function. It is a cooking pot, a storage jar, a work of art, and a vessel of belief, all at once, born from the mud, shell, and smoke of the river valley. You leave the quiet intensity of the potter's workshop, the image of the beautiful black polished jar fresh in your mind. An object like that, so skillfully made and bearing such powerful symbols, is more than just a simple container. It is an item of value, of prestige. It is a trade good. And the thought of trade, of commerce, pulls you towards another of the city's vital organs. You follow the flow of people towards a district where the low hum of domestic life is replaced by a rising cacophony of human voices. The air, once scented with clay and smoke, now carries a dozen new smells. The rich, gamey scent of tanned animal hides, the sharp tang of dried herbs, the savory aroma of meat being smoked over a slow fire, and the faint, salty brine of fish brought up from the river. You have found the marketplace. This is not the vast, ceremonial emptiness of the Grand Plaza. This space is chaotic, crowded, and bursting with life. There are no neat stalls or storefronts. Instead, hundreds of people are gathered in a sprawling, open area near the river landing, the perfect spot for traders who have just arrived on the riverine highway. Vendors sit on woven mats on the ground, their wares spread out before them on animal skins or in wide, shallow baskets. The noise is a constant, energetic babble of haggling, gossiping, and laughing. It's a vibrant, human scene, the commercial heart of the city pumping with energy. You navigate through the throng, careful not to step on a pile of carefully crafted flint arrowheads or a display of dried squash. Your eyes are drawn to the incredible variety of goods on display, and you quickly realize that this is far more than a local farmer's market. This is an international hub. Cahokia sits at the center of a trade network that spans the entire continent, and here, in this bustling market, is the evidence. On one mat, a man displays objects of a strange reddish metal that glows warmly in the sun. It is copper, beaten into thin, ornate pendants and heavy, cylindrical ear spools that stretch the lobes of their wearers. This copper, you understand, began its journey hundreds of miles to the north, mined by different peoples in the lands around the Great Lakes. A little further on, a woman is selling items made from enormous, cream colored seashells. There are cups and bowls made from the hollowed out bodies of massive whelk shells, and intricate pendants called gorgets carved from the thick, flat whorls of their walls. These shells have traveled even further than the copper, passed hand to hand up the river systems, all the way from the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. You see tools made from colorful, high quality stone that isn't found locally, and glittering sheets of mica, a translucent, silvery mineral from the Appalachian Mountains, cut into the delicate shape of a bird's claw or a human hand. Among all the glitter and exoticism, you notice a vendor selling something that looks much more mundane: small, lumpy cakes of a coarse, grayish white crystal. It is salt. In a world without refrigeration, salt is a strategic resource, essential for preserving meat and fish to survive the lean winter months. It was so valuable that its production was a major industry. At specialized sites not far from Cahokia, workers collected water from natural salt springs and boiled it for hours in enormous, thick walled ceramic pans until only the salt crystals remained. It was a hot, miserable, labor intensive job, and the resulting salt bricks were a key commodity traded far and wide. It may not be as glamorous as a seashell cup, but for survival, it was far more important. You look at all this commerce: a trader from the north exchanging a copper knife for a finely painted southern bowl, and you wonder how it all works. There is no money, no coins changing hands. So, how is value determined? It's a question that archaeologists and economists still argue about. Was this a true market economy, where goods had a generally agreed upon price? Did a bushel of corn equal 10 good arrowheads, and did 10 bushels of corn equal one small copper ornament? Or was much of this trade something else entirely? A system of prestige goods exchange operating on a much higher social level. In that model, these exotic items, the copper, the shells, the mica, were not for sale to just anyone. They were strategic gifts exchanged between the paramount chief of Cahokia and the leaders of other towns and chiefdoms to cement political alliances, pay tribute, or display personal power. That beautiful whelk shell cup wasn't bought for a handful of corn. It was a state gift from a visiting dignitary to your ruler. The truth is likely a mix of both systems, with common goods as being bartered in the market while the luxury items moved through channels of power. The crowd itself is as diverse as the goods. You see the local Cahokians, but you also see dozens of people who are clearly visitors. They have different styles of tattoos, different ways of wearing their hair, and speak in languages that are a cascade of unfamiliar sounds. This market is a true melting pot, the destination for all the travelers you saw on the great river. It is a place of connection where a farmer, a hunter, a potter, and a priest can all come together, a noisy, smelly, vibrant testament to the city's immense reach and its central place in the world. As you move away from the sensory overload of the marketplace, a new sound cuts through the city's general hum. It's a roar, a sudden, sharp, collective shout from hundreds of voices rising and falling in a wave of excitement. It's a sound that is universally human and instantly recognizable, the sound of a crowd at a sporting event. It pulls you along, a current of curiosity leading you back toward the city's ceremonial heart. You find yourself once again at the edge of the Grand Plaza, but the vast empty space you first encountered has been utterly transformed. It is no longer a silent, intimidating stage for the gods. It has become a stadium. Thousands of people are packed along the edges of a long, narrow corridor of immaculately prepared earth, a playing field cleared in the center of the plaza. The air is electric with anticipation, the kind of tense, joyful energy you would feel before the kickoff of a championship game. Two men walk onto the field, and the crowd's roar intensifies. They are the athletes, and they are magnificent. They are young, in peak physical condition, their lean, powerful muscles moving with a fluid grace. Their bodies are painted with bold symbols in white and red clay, and their only clothing is a simple breechcloth, allowing for maximum freedom of movement. In their hands, they each carry a long, slender spear, about 6 feet in length, with a fire hardened tip. They are not the heavy, broad headed spears of a warrior. These are lighter, more like javelins, designed for throwing with speed and accuracy. The men carry themselves with an air of supreme confidence, acknowledging the crowd's cheers with a slight nod. They are local heroes, celebrities, the living embodiment of skill and strength. The game is about to begin. One of the players stands at the head of the long earthen alley. In his hand, he holds a small stone disc, about the size of a hockey puck. He crouches low, his body coiled like a spring. Then, with a powerful, underhand swing of his arm, he sends the stone disc rolling down the playing field. It moves with incredible speed, a silent, spinning blur against the brown earth. As soon as the stone leaves his hand, both athletes explode into a full sprint, running parallel to the disc's path. They are trying to match its speed, their eyes fixed on it, judging its trajectory and its loss of momentum. Then, in a moment of what seems like pure instinct, just as the disc begins to wobble, they both launch their spears. The slender javelins fly through the air in a smooth arc, landing with a soft thud in the dirt far down the field. The crowd holds its breath. The object of the game, called Chunky, is deceptively simple. The winner is the player whose spear lands closest to the spot where the stone disc finally comes to rest. After the spears have been thrown, the crowd surges forward slightly to get a better view as an official runs to the spot. He carefully measures the distance between the tip of each spear and the stone. A hand is raised, a winner declared for the round, and the crowd either erupts in cheers or groans in disappointment. It is a game that requires an incredible combination of physical and mental talents, the power to roll the stone, the speed to keep up with it, and the almost supernatural ability to predict its final stopping point. It's a prehistoric combination of lawn bowls, javelin throwing, and a 100-meter dash. You look closer at the stone deck itself. It is not just a random rock. The chunky stones were objects of immense value and beauty, true works of art. They were often made from rare types of stone, like quartz, granite, or hematite, chosen for their color and density. They were then painstakingly ground down and polished for hundreds, if not thousands, of hours until they were perfectly symmetrical and glassy smooth. These stones were not communal property. They were the prized possessions of elite players, sometimes passed down from father to son or buried with their owner as a grave good of the highest honor. The stone wasn't just a piece of sporting equipment, it was a sacred object. This is no friendly game either. The stakes are incredibly high. All around you in the crowd, people are gambling. Men are wagering everything they have on the outcome of a single throw. You see a man hand over a beautifully made flint knife after his champion's spear landed a hand's breadth further from the stone than his opponent's. You see another wager, a pile of valuable furs. Legend says that some men, caught in the grip of the game, would wager their possessions, their homes, even their own freedom, becoming slaves on the outcome of a roll. But why was this game so important? Historians and archaeologists still argue about the true social function of chunky. Was it just a hugely popular sport, a way to entertain the masses and facilitate gambling? Or did it serve a deeper, more critical role? Some scholars believe chunky was a form of ritualized conflict, a political tool used to settle disputes between rival towns or clans without having to resort to a full-scale war. A victory in a major chunky tournament could bring immense prestige and influence, while a loss could be a source of profound communal shame. It was a spectacle, a pastime, and perhaps a pillar of statecraft, all rolled into one. The energy of the chunky game slowly dissipates, the crowd breaking apart into smaller groups, the electric tension of the match giving way to the normal rhythms of the afternoon. The excitement, the shouting, and the sheer spectacle have left you feeling hungry. The simple corn porridge you ate at dawn feels like a distant memory, a fuel that has long since been burned. It is time for the midday meal, and thankfully, you are about to discover that the Cahokian diet is more than just an endless cycle of gritty, boiled maize. Life here has more flavor than that. You wander back toward your neighborhood, following the savory scent of cooking fires. While corn was the ever present staff of life, the caloric bedrock of the society, the landscape here was teeming with protein. The undisputed king of the Mississippian menu was the white-tailed deer. For the people of Cahokia, the deer was everything. It provided venison, a lean and vital source of meat. Its hide was tanned to make clothing, blankets, and moccasins. Its bones were cracked for their marrow and then fashioned into a vast array of tools: needles, awls, fish hooks, and ornaments. Even its sinew was processed into strong cordage for tying and binding. The forests and patchy prairies surrounding the city were carefully managed to maximize the deer population, and skilled hunters with bows and stone tipped arrows brought it back to the city in a steady stream. But the bounty didn't stop there. The Mississippi River and its vast network of backwater lakes and marshy wetlands were a gigantic, self stocking pantry, providing an endless supply of fish, turtles, and migrating waterfowl like ducks and geese. You arrive back at your family compound to find preparations for a feast well underway. Today's meal is not being cooked in a simple pot over a fire. It is being excavated. You watch as a woman uses a flat piece of wood to carefully scrape away a mound of earth, revealing a thick, steaming layer of green leaves underneath. She is uncovering an earth oven, a brilliantly simple and effective method of slow cooking. The process started hours ago when a pit was dug and lined with stones. A roaring fire was built on top of the stones until they were glowing with intense heat. Then the fire and embers were swept away. A large joint of venison, perhaps an entire deer haunch, was wrapped in broad, wet leaves and placed directly onto the searingly hot rocks. The whole thing was then covered with more leaves and buried completely with the excavated earth, sealing in the heat and moisture. It is a prehistoric slow cooker, a barbecue pit, and pressure cooker all in one. As the final layer of leaves is pulled back, a cloud of fragrant steam erupts, carrying the rich, smoky aroma of perfectly tender, slow roasted meat. A portion of the venison is carved for you using a razor sharp flint knife. The meat is so tender it falls away from the bone. Alongside it, you are given a bowl of the thick, hearty stew that has been bubbling for hours in a large pottery jar propped next to a fire. This is where all the elements of the Cahokian world come together. The stew is rich with chunks of fish, flakes of venison, and of course the ever present trinity of corn, beans, and squash. But there are other flavors too: the nutty taste of hickory nuts and the earthy notes of foraged greens, all swimming in a savory broth. It is a complex, satisfying meal that tastes of the forest, the river, and the field all at once. It's a world away from this morning's plain porridge. As you eat the succulent deer meat, you look past the farmlands towards the horizon, where the great prairies begin. Those vast grasslands were home to another massive source of protein, the bison. And it makes you wonder. Archaeologists and historians still argue about the role of bison in the Cahokian diet. They were certainly aware of them, and some bison bones are found here, but in far smaller quantities than the bones of deer. Did the Cahokians organize great, long distance hunting parties, sending groups of men onto the dangerous, open prairies for weeks at a time to hunt the massive beasts? Or was bison a rare delicacy, a high status food reserved for the elite, perhaps acquired through trade with plains tribes? Maybe they simply preferred to stick to the woods and rivers they knew so well. The answer remains elusive, a ghost on the edge of their culinary world. The midday meal is more than just sustenance, it's a vital pause in the rhythm of the day. The sun is now at its peak, radiating a fierce, oppressive heat. Across the city, The frantic energy of the morning gives way to a period of rest and repose. People retreat to the cool, dim interiors of their wattle and daub houses, or seek the shade of a large tree. The fields fall quiet. For a brief hour, the city slows its breath. It is a time for digestion, for quiet conversation, for mending a tool or telling a story. It is a reminder that even in a world defined by hard labor, there were moments of savory pleasure and shared, peaceful rest. As the deep, restful quiet of the midday meal begins to fade, the city slowly stirs back to life. The oppressive heat of the high sun has lessened slightly, and the rhythm of work resumes. But instead of returning to the fields or the workshops, you feel drawn towards something else, another of the city's great public works. You walk west, away from the Grand Plaza and the imposing face of Monk's Mound, toward a large flat clearing. As you approach, you see it's not another residential area or a marketplace. It's a vast, perfect circle delineated by a series of massive, upright wooden posts standing like silent sentinels against the sky. You have found what modern archaeologists have nicknamed Woodhenge. This is not a fence or the frame of a colossal building. This is a scientific instrument of immense scale and precision. You stand before a great circle of posts, each one a thick, straight log of reddish-hued timber, taller than 3 men and sunk deep into the earth. There are dozens of them, spaced with painstaking mathematical regularity. This, you begin to understand, is Cahokia's clock. It is a massive solar calendar designed to track the journey of the sun across the sky and mark the turning of the seasons. From a specific observation point near the center of the circle, a priest or sky watcher could watch the sunrise throughout the year. On the day of the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the sun would appear to rise directly behind one specific post. On the winter solstice, the shortest day, it would rise behind another. The equinoxes, too, had their own dedicated posts, marking the 2 points in the year when day and night are of equal length. It is a simple concept, but to execute it on this scale, with this level of accuracy, required sophisticated astronomical observation and complex geometric knowledge, all passed down through generations. You walk closer, admiring the posts themselves. They are not the common oak or hickory used in the palisade. These are logs of red cedar, a tree held sacred by many native peoples. Its reddish wood, its pleasant aroma, and its remarkable resistance to rot gave it a special spiritual power. This was not just a tool, it was a sacred space, and you realize that to use it properly, you wouldn't just stand anywhere. Archaeologists believe that near the center of the circle, there was a special, elevated observation post. The chief priest would ascend this platform before dawn on a holy day, placing himself literally at the center of the universe to watch for the sacred alignment. It was his duty, his privileged knowledge, that allowed him to announce to the people the precise moment the season had turned. It was a source of immense authority. Imagine being the only person who can officially declare that summer has begun. This celestial knowledge was not just an intellectual exercise, it was fundamental to the city's survival. For a society so completely dependent on the maize you saw growing in the fields. Knowing the exact right time to plant was a matter of life and death. Plant too early, and a late frost could kill the tender seedlings. Plant too late, and the corn might not have time to mature before the first frost of autumn. This giant wooden calendar told the farmers when the danger of frost had passed and the soil was ready. It told them when to prepare for the great harvest. The priests who interpreted the sun's movements from this circle weren't just spiritual leaders. They were the keepers of the agricultural schedule, the guardians of the city's food supply. Their predictions ensured the granaries were full and the people were fed. But was this magnificent circle merely a practical farming tool, or was it something more? It's a question that sparks the imagination. Archaeologists and mythologists still argue whether Woodhenge was simply a calendar or if it represented something much deeper. Perhaps the circle itself symbolized the world or the sky. Perhaps each of the 48 posts that made up its most complex version had its own meaning, representing a specific deity, a clan, or a chapter in a creation story. The entire structure could have been a physical map of the Mississippian cosmos, a place where time, space, religion, and social structure all came together. It was a way of making the universe understandable and showing how their society fit perfectly within its grand, cyclical design. You can easily imagine the scene on the morning of the summer solstice. Thousands of people gather in the pre dawn gloom, their faces turned eastward in hushed anticipation. The chief and his priests stand on the central platform. Then, as the first sliver of the sun breaks the horizon, its brilliant light shines directly through the gap between two posts, perfectly framing a third, the solstice post, standing alone on the eastern edge of the circle. A great roar would erupt from the crowd. The sun had returned to its peak, the longest day was here, and the great summer festival could begin. The calendar wasn't just a clock for farming, it was a trigger for the city's most important communal celebrations. Standing within the silent ring of sacred cedar, you feel a different kind of power than the one you felt in the plaza. It's not the raw political power of a ruler, it's the quiet intellectual power of understanding, a deep and reassuring connection to the predictable, eternal rhythms of the cosmos. You wander away from the silent, sacred circle of Woodhenge, your mind still buzzing with the cosmic order it represents. Leaving its intellectual power behind, you walk back towards the Grand Plaza, the great stage at the heart of the city. This time, however, your focus is not on the vast, empty space itself, nor on the colossal mountain of Monk's Mound that dominates it. Instead, you look at the dozen or so smaller, flat topped mounds that line the plaza's perimeter. You realize now that these are not just ceremonial platforms or random monuments. These are the city's most exclusive properties. This is the high rent district, the Cahokian equivalent of a gated community in the sky, and living here is a privilege reserved for the chosen few, the city's elite. On top of each of these mounds sits a house, or perhaps a small compound of buildings. They are constructed in the same wattle and daub style as the common houses, but they are noticeably larger, more complex, and better maintained. The ground around them is clear and clean, and some have their own small palisades or privacy fences. From these elevated homes, the residents have a commanding view of the plaza and the entire city while remaining physically separate from the populace below. As you watch, a figure emerges from one of the largest of these mountaintop homes, and you get your first clear glimpse of a member of the Cahokian nobility. The difference between this person and the weary farmers or dusty artisans you've seen is immediate and staggering. Their clothing is not the simple deerskin breechcloth or fiber skirt of a commoner. They wear a wrap woven from fine, soft textiles decorated with complex geometric patterns painted in red and black. Over their shoulders is a magnificent cloak, so densely covered with thousands of tiny, overlapping shell beads that it shimmers and ripples in the sunlight like the scales of a fish. They are dripping with the exotic goods you saw in the marketplace. A heavy, polished copper gorget hangs on their chest, intricate ear spools made from seashell pull at their earlobes, and around their neck are multiple strands of polished river pearls and colorful stone beads. This is a life of immense privilege, a status confirmed by the rich grave goods found in elite burials, where individuals were interred with all the finery they enjoyed in life, surrounded by symbols of their power. Their posture is different, too. They move with a slow, deliberate confidence, an air of innate authority that comes from a life free of hard labor. Then you notice something truly strange, a detail that marks them as fundamentally different: their head. It is not shaped like yours or anyone else you've seen working in the fields. The back of their skull slopes upward at a sharp angle, creating a conical, elongated shape. This is the result of cranial modification, a permanent and painful marker of the highest social status. From the moment of birth, the heads of elite infants were gently but firmly bound between two small wooden boards, forcing the soft, pliable skull to grow into this specific, unnatural shape. It was an irreversible declaration of nobility. You could not fake it. In a society with no written titles, your own body became the credential that proved you were born to rule, forever separating you from the round headed masses below. Seeing such a figure, clearly a noble but not the paramount chief himself, makes you wonder about the layers of power here. It couldn't just be the one great ruler on Monk's Mound and then everybody else. There had to be a complex hierarchy. Historians and archaeologists still argue about the composition of this elite class. Was it a single, massive royal family, a kind of celestial dynasty where the chief's brothers, sisters, and cousins were appointed to run the various sectors of the city, one in charge of the warriors, one the high priest of Woodhenge, another the master of trade? Or was the political landscape more complicated, with several powerful and competing noble lineages, each with its own history and mound-top compound, all vying for influence under the watchful eye of the paramount chief? The political machinations, the alliances and rivalries that played out on these mounds were likely as complex and dramatic as those of any royal court in the world. The benefits of this status were absolute. These elites ate the best food, the choicest cuts of venison, while you ate porridge. They lived in larger, cleaner homes, literally elevated above the smoke, mud, and disease of the crowded neighborhoods below. They were protected by the Great Palisade, a barrier that reinforced their separation. Their lives were not consumed by the physical toil of farming or building, but by the intellectual and strategic work of politics, ritual, and warfare, the essential software that ran the entire Cahokian enterprise. This physical separation was the key to their power. By living on the mounds, they were rendered remote, mysterious, and closer to the gods in the sky world. When they descended to the plaza to preside over a ceremony, it was a major event, a visitation from another realm. The social distance was not just a fact of life, it was a carefully maintained strategy of power, ensuring that the hierarchy felt natural, eternal, and divinely ordained. You watch the shimmering, bead covered noble on his mountaintop perch, a figure seemingly halfway between the earth and the sky. His privileged position, his elongated skull, his exotic adornments, they all scream that he is more than just a wealthy man. He is a key player in a spiritual drama that underpins this entire society. To understand Cahokia, to grasp why the mounds were built and why the chief holds such absolute power, you have to understand the universe as they saw it. You have to look past the physical city and see the cosmos it was built to reflect. Their universe was not the vast, chaotic sprawl of stars and galaxies we know today. It was a structured, layered, and deeply meaningful place, divided into three distinct tiers. You are standing in the middle world, the realm of humans. In their cosmology, this world was a flat island of earth, floating in a great sea of water. It was the world of the tangible, the world of corn, deer, and daily life. But it was constantly influenced by the two great powers that lay above and below it. Above you was the upper world. This was a realm of perfection, order, stability, and light. It was associated with the sun, the moon, lightning, and the great thunderbirds. It was a masculine world of structure and predictability, the source of creation and divine law. Its inhabitants were powerful bird spirits, especially raptors like falcons and eagles, who were revered for their ability to soar to the heavens. Beneath you and beneath the waters of the great river was the lower world. This was the opposite of the sky realm. It was a world of chaos, darkness, moisture, and uncontrolled transformation. It was associated with the night, caves, swamps, and the deep water. It was a feminine world of fertility, but also of madness and death. It was not necessarily evil in the way a modern person might think of hell, but it was a dangerous and unpredictable place, home to powerful spirits like the horned water serpent and the underwater panther. The Mississippian people believed they lived their lives on the middle world, caught in a constant, delicate balancing act between the perfect, celestial order from above and the potent, dangerous chaos from below. And the center of that world, the point where all three layers connected, the axis mundi or world pillar, was right here. It was Cahokia. The city itself, and specifically the great man-made mountain of Monk's Mound, was the physical connection between the realms. And certain powerful animals were seen as special because they could also cross these cosmic boundaries. Birds, as you've seen in their feather decorations, could touch the upper world, and the serpent, the ultimate symbol of the lower world, was a master of transformation. It could move on land, disappear into a hole in the earth, and swim in the water, effortlessly bridging the realms. This is why you see the recurring themes of the bird and the serpent in their art, on pottery, on shell carvings, on the tattoos on their skin. It is the visual representation of the cosmic struggle between the sky and the deeps. So, where does the paramount chief on his great mound fit into all this? He is the linchpin. He is the mediator, the divine link, the one man responsible for maintaining the fragile balance between the worlds. Living on his man made mountain, he is physically positioned between the earth and the sky, a living conduit for spiritual power. But what was his exact nature? It's a profound question, and anthropologists and historians still argue about the precise nature of the paramount chief's divinity. Was he seen as a living god, a direct descendant of the sun itself, making him a divine being walking the earth? Or was his role more that of a high priest, a mortal man who, through his sacred lineage and mastery of the correct rituals, was the only person capable of speaking to the gods and appeasing the spirits on behalf of his people? Is he a deity, or is he simply the only one with the keys to the kingdom? Either way, his role is utterly indispensable. Without him, the balance would be lost, and the middle world would be consumed by chaos or withered by a sterile order. This belief system explains so much of what you have seen. The rituals at Woodhenge were not just for farming, they were diplomatic negotiations with the powerful beings of the upper world. The intricate symbols on the Ramian-sized pottery are not just pretty patterns, they are cosmological diagrams, maps of this three-tiered reality. The entire layout of the city is a physical model of their beliefs, with the divine chief on his high mound, the lesser elites on their smaller mounds, and the common people on the flat earth, all in their proper place. The goal of their state religion was to maintain cosmic equilibrium. A flood from the river or a sudden outbreak of disease could be seen as a sign that the lower world's chaos was ascendant. A long, crop killing drought could be a sign that the upper world was displeased. The chief's ceremonies, his sacrifices, his very existence were all designed to keep the universe in balance, ensuring that Cahokia would continue to thrive in the world between worlds. You have begun to grasp the grand, sweeping architecture of the Mississippian cosmos, the state religion that gives the chief on his mound the sacred duty of keeping the universe in balance. But that is a cosmic, wholesale kind of faith. What happens when the universe's problems become smaller, more personal? What happened when a child falls sick with a fever that won't break? When a dark omen is seen in the flight of a bird? Or when a hunter needs to know if his journey will be successful? For these intimate, retail level spiritual needs, you don't go to the paramount chief. You go to a shaman. As night falls over the city, blanketing the neighborhoods in a deep darkness, broken only by the flickering orange glow of countless small fires, you are drawn to one such gathering. It is not in the grand plaza or on a high mound, but in a quiet corner of a residential area, held within a house slightly larger than the others, a communal space for the local kin group. A small handful of people are gathered, their faces anxious and hopeful in the firelight. At the center of the group sits the shaman. This individual is not dressed in the shimmering copper and shell of the political elite. Their authority comes from a different source. They are older, their face a roadmap of deep lines, and they wear items that speak not of wealth, but of spiritual power: a necklace of polished animal teeth, a pouch made from the skin of an otter, and in their lap rests a small, intricately carved stone pipe. The purpose of tonight's ceremony is healing. A young man sits before the shaman, shivering with a fever despite the warm night air. The shaman begins the ritual by preparing the sacred plants that bridge the gap between the worlds. The most important of these is tobacco. For these people, tobacco is not a casual indulgence. It is a holy sacrament, a powerful tool for communicating with the spirit world. The shaman carefully fills the stone pipe, which is carved into the effigy of a frog, a creature of the lower world. When lit, the smoke from the burning tobacco will be seen as a physical manifestation of the shaman's prayers, its gray plumes carrying his appeal from this middle world up to the spirits of the sky. But there may be another substance used in a ceremony like this. You see the shaman take a drink from a small bowl containing a dark, frothy liquid. This is likely the black drink, a highly caffeinated beverage brewed from the roasted leaves and stems of the Yaupon holly. This drink was a powerful purifying agent. It was often consumed in large quantities until it induced ceremonial vomiting, an act seen not as unpleasant, but as a necessary cleansing of the body and spirit. To speak with the gods, one had to first be made pure, and the black drink was the fastest way to get there. It's a ritual detoxification far more intense than any modern juice cleanse. With the preparations complete, the ritual begins. The shaman lights the pipe with a coal from the fire. He takes a deep draw and exhales the thick, pungent smoke first to the east, then the south, the west, and the north. Then he blows smoke upwards towards the upper world and downwards towards the lower world, acknowledging all the cosmic powers and directions. He begins to chant, a low, repetitive, nasal sound that is hypnotic in its monotony. He picks up a rattle made from a dried gourd filled with pebbles and begins to shake it, creating a soft, whispering rhythm that syncs with his chanting. The fire crackles, the patient shivers. The small crowd is utterly silent, their attention fixed on the proceedings. You realize you are witnessing a different but equally vital form of spiritual life in the city, and it makes you wonder about its place within the society. Historians and archaeologists still argue about the relationship between these shamanic practices and the official state religion of the paramount chief. Were they complementary systems, with the chief managing the large-scale health of the cosmos and the shamans acting as doctors and diviners for the community? Or could a particularly powerful shaman, one known for successful healings and accurate prophecies, become a source of rival authority, a threat to the centralized power of the elite on the mounds? The answer is likely complex, a delicate dance between state power and folk tradition. The shaman's chanting grows louder, the rhythm of the rattle faster. His eyes are closed, His head sways back and forth. He is entering a trance, a state where his spirit is believed to leave his body and travel into the other worlds to find the cause of the illness. He may be battling a malevolent spirit from the lower world or pleading for aid from a benevolent one in the upper world. The fate of the sick young man hangs in the balance of this spiritual journey. The shaman speaks, but his voice is different, his words disjointed and strange. He is relating what he sees in the spirit realm. When the ritual ends and the shaman returns to his body, looking drained and exhausted, his visions will be interpreted, and a course of action, perhaps a medicinal herb to be administered or another ritual to be performed, will be prescribed. The fire burns low. A quiet sense of hope, or at least of having been heard by the universe, settles over the small gathering. The cosmic balance on this one small personal scale has been addressed. The shaman's quiet ritual, with its focus on healing and restoring the balance for one individual, fades into the back of your mind. It is a comforting thought that spiritual power could be used so personally, so gently. But power in Cahokia has another face, one that is far more demanding and absolute. The life of a commoner is one thing, but the death of a great leader is another entirely. A chief who could command the cosmos in life expected to do the same in death, and his journey into the next world was not a solitary affair. You find yourself standing before a small, unassuming mound just south of the Grand Plaza. It is not tall and flat topped like the homes of the living elite, but long and rounded, a ridge top mound. It seems less impressive than the others, but the story buried within its earthen heart is the most profound and unsettling in the entire city. This is the mound known today as Mound 72. From the outside, it is just a quiet hillock. But if you could peel back the layers of earth, if you could look down into its core, as archaeologists did centuries later, you would see a story of immense power, belief, and death. At the very bottom of the mound, on a floor of clean white sand, a great leader was laid to rest nearly 1,000 years ago. He was not plowed in a simple grave. He was laid upon a blanket, a magnificent cape woven not of fiber, but of beads. More than 20,000 individual seashell beads, painstakingly drilled and polished, were arranged in the distinct shape of a falcon, its wings outstretched and its head aligned with the leader's. He was literally wrapped in the symbol of the upper world, a bird of prey to carry his spirit to the heavens. This was the man archaeologists call the Birdman. He did not go into the afterlife empty-handed. His burial was surrounded by a staggering collection of the most valuable prestige goods imaginable, a hoard that represented the wealth and reach of his entire domain. There was a pile of shimmering, uncut mica from the mountains of North Carolina. There was a thick roll of pure copper from the shores of the Great Lakes. Nearby were several of the polished discoidal stones used in the game of chunky, symbols of elite status and masculine power. And most impressive of all, there was a cache of over 800 pristine arrowheads. They were not a jumbled pile. They were neatly sorted by the type of stone they were made from and their point of origin. There were blades of flint from Oklahoma, chert from Tennessee, and stone from Wisconsin and Arkansas. They were all perfect, unused, and exquisitely crafted. This was not an arsenal for war. It was a symbolic map of the chief's power, a tribute from every corner of the Mississippian world laid at his feet for his journey into the next. And he did not go alone. This is the grim heart of the mound's story. Arranged around the central burial of the Birdman were the remains of over 250 other people. Near him lay the bodies of several high status individuals, likely his closest retainers, buried with their own fine grave goods, ready to serve him in death as they had in life. But that was just the beginning. A little further away was a large pit containing the bodies of more than 50 young women, all between the ages of 18 and 23, arranged in two neat layers, their bodies carefully aligned. Another pit held four young men, their arms interlocked, their heads and hands inexplicably missing. In other areas of the mound, dozens more were buried, clearly all at the same time, as part of this single, massive funeral event. This was not a community cemetery. This was a statement. This was human sacrifice on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. This was not an act of random violence or rage. It was a cold, orderly, and deeply ritualized public display of the paramount chief's absolute power. His authority was so immense that it did not end at the boundary of life. He could command hundreds of people to die with him, to accompany him, serve him, and display his importance in the next world. It was the ultimate performance of social and spiritual dominance, but it leaves behind a haunting, unanswerable question. Who were these people? The most unsettling question, one which historians and archaeologists still argue about, is the identity of these sacrificed individuals. Were they enemies, captives taken in a recent war, whose public execution would serve as a terrifying warning to any rival chiefdom? Were they slaves, considered property with no more right to their own lives than a pot or a dog? Or, in a way the most chilling possibility of all, were they members of the chief's own community, loyal retainers and servants, perhaps even members of elite families who went to their deaths willingly, believing it was their greatest honor and sacred duty to follow their divine ruler into the great beyond? The bones cannot tell us if they screamed or if they went in silent reverence. Standing before this quiet, grassy mound, you feel the immense weight of its secret. It reveals the dark, authoritarian underside of the great city. The same power that could organize the labor of thousands to build Woodhenge, the same belief system that gave the city its cosmic order, could also command this. The city of Cahokia, for all its art, its trade, and its sophistication, was built on a foundation of power that was absolute and at times absolutely terrifying. The somber story of Mound 72 and its mass burials leaves a chill in the air. The image of those 50 young women, arranged in neat rows to accompany a male leader into the afterlife, is a stark testament to the absolute nature of the chief's power. It is easy, when looking at the great mounds, the palisade, and the chunky field, to see Cahokia as a world entirely dominated by men and their ambitions. But that is only half the story, the half written in monumental earthworks and ostentatious burials. To understand what truly made the city run, you have to shift your gaze went from the grand public stage and back to the hearth, the workshop, and the fields. You have to look at the world of Cahokian women. Their labor was the engine of the city's economy. You saw them in the vast cornfields, their backs bent under the hot sun. While men may have done the initial heavy clearing of the land, it was the women who were the primary farmers. They were the ones who planted the seeds, who spent the long summer months weeding the plots with their stone bladed hoes, and who were central to the great communal effort of the harvest. They were the producers of the literal fuel that every single person, from the lowest commoner to the chief himself, depended upon. In the workshops, it was women's hands that coiled the clay and shaped the iconic pottery, creating the essential vessels both for cooking, storing food and water, and for trade. It was women who gathered reeds and plant fibers, spinning them into cordage and weaving them into textiles for clothing, durable bags, and sleeping mats. Without the constant, skilled labor of women, the city of Cahokia would have simply starved and crumbled into dust. But their importance went far deeper than just their economic contribution. It was woven into the very fabric of their social structure. Most scholars believe that Mississippian societies like Cahokia were matrilineal. This is a concept that can be difficult for a modern mind, accustomed to patrilineal systems, to fully grasp. It means that your identity, your clan membership, your social status, and your inheritance were all passed down not through your father's line, but through your mother's. You belonged to your mother's kin group. The most important male figures in a boy's life were often not his biological father, who belonged to a different lineage entirely, but his maternal uncles, his mother's brothers. They were the ones who would teach him, guide him, and advocate for him in the world. The home you lived in likely belonged to your mother's family. The entire social DNA of the city was traced through its women. You can see this worldview reflected in their art and artifacts. You might see a potter, the one you observed in her workshop, crafting a special water bottle. Instead of a simple jar, she shapes it into the effigy of a woman. The body of the vessel is the woman's body. The spout is her head. Sometimes she is shown carrying a pack on her back or a cradle board holding an infant. These are not just charming decorations. They are powerful symbolic statements, explicitly linking the female form with the concepts of water, sustenance, and the continuity of the family line. In the Cahokian mind, women were the vessels of society itself. They contained and carried forward the future. This brings up a fascinating and complex question. If society was organized around female lineage, what did that mean for female political power? It's a matter that anthropologists and historians still argue about. The public, visible face of power was almost exclusively male. The paramount chief was a man. The warriors, the great hunters, and the heroic chunky players were men. But the chief's own claim to his title likely depended entirely on his relationship to a high status woman, his mother, or perhaps a sister from the ruling matriline. So were these elite women the quiet power behind the throne? Were they the kingmakers, the ones who determined which of their sons or brothers would rule, wielding immense influence through their control of kinship and succession? Or were their roles strictly defined and contained, powerful within the domestic and lineage spheres, but entirely separate from the world of male dominated politics and war? We see the man sitting on the mound-top throne, but we can't be sure if it was his mother who put him there. This creates a complex and often paradoxical view of a woman's life here. On one hand, she is the center of the family, the source of the lineage, the backbone of the economy, and symbolically revered as the wellspring of life itself. On the other hand, as the grim lesson of Mound 72 shows, she could also be seen as disposable, a sacrificial offering to appease the gods or to display the power of a male chief. Her life was a constant navigation between these two realities, revered as a creator, yet subjugated by the ultimate authority of the state. The story of Cahokia is not just his story, it is, more fundamentally, hers. You move on from the powerful, complex world of Cahokian women with their central role in lineage and the production of food and pottery. Theirs was a world of soft power, of clay and fiber, of creation and sustenance. But a city as large and complex as Cahokia also needed a different kind of craft, a world of hard edges, sharp points, and percussive force. You wander into another neighborhood, and the sounds here are different. It is not the soft scrape of a potter's tool or the rhythmic thump of a grain pestle. Here, the air is filled with a sharp, distinct tink, tink, tink of stone striking stone. The ground is littered with glittering, razor-sharp flakes of rock. You have found the workshops of the flint knappers and the woodworkers, the men who created the city's essential toolkit. You pause to watch a master flint knapper at work. He sits on the ground, a leather pad covering his lap. Before him is a collection of dull, lumpy-looking rocks or nodules of chert, a fine-grained, silica-rich stone that modern people would call flint. To an untrained eye, they are just rocks. To him, they are full of possibility, pregnant with the forms of knives, scrapers, and arrowheads. He picks up a nodule in one hand and a smooth, heavy river cobble in the other. This is his hammerstone. With a sharp, practiced flick of his wrist, he strikes the edge of the chert nodule. Tink! A large, shell-shaped flake breaks free. He turns the nodule, strikes again. Tink! Another flake falls away. This is not random smashing. It is a highly controlled process of reduction, of removing everything that isn't the tool he has in his mind's eye. This is percussion flaking, the rough shaping of the tool. Once he has a basic preform, a crude approximation of the final tool, the work becomes more delicate. He sets aside his hammerstone and picks up a new tool, a piece of thick, tough deer antler. He places the preform on the leather pad on his leg, pressing the tip of the antler firmly against the sharp edge of the stone. He applies a sudden, focused pressure. A tiny, long, thin flake pops off with a faint click. This is pressure flaking, the art of fine detail. Click by click, he meticulously sculpts the final form, creating the sharp, serrated edges of a knife blade or the distinctive notches at the base of an arrowhead that will allow it to be tied to a shaft. This is a skill that takes a lifetime to master, a deep, intuitive understanding of geology and physics passed down through generations. All around the workshop, you see the fruits of this labor. There are the large, heavy, triangular blades destined to become the business end of the farming hoes you saw in the fields. There are gracefully curved, leaf shaped knives for butchering animals and scrapers for cleaning their hides. And there are piles of the beautiful, symmetrical projectile points, arrowheads, so perfect they look like the ones you imagined buried in Mound 72. But then you see him working on something so small it seems impossible. He is crafting micro drills. These are tiny, exquisitely delicate stone drill bits, some no longer than your fingernail, with a point almost too fine to see. You realize with a jolt of understanding that these are the very tools used to bore the impossibly tiny holes in the 20,000 shell beads that made up the birdman's burial cape. The patience and steadiness of hand required to create, let alone use, such a microscopic tool is staggering. It is ancient micromachining, a testament to a level of craftsmanship that borders on magic. Of course, a stone blade is useless without a handle or a shaft. Nearby, a woodworker is busy giving these stone tools their final functional form. You watch him take a long, straight stave of Osage orange wood, a famously strong and flexible wood, and carefully shape it into a powerful bow using a stone adze and scraper. He straightens arrow shafts made from river cane by gently heating them over a fire and bending them by hand. He takes one of the flint knapper's hoe blades and carefully halves it, setting it into a notch in a wooden handle and binding it tightly with tough animal sinew and a glue made from natural bitumen. The flint knapper and the woodworker are two halves of the same whole, their skills completely interdependent. Seeing the incredible specialization and skill required for this work, you have to wonder about the lives of these men. Were they full time professionals? It's a question archaeologists and historians still argue about. Were they supported by the paramount chief, fed from the city's communal granaries so they could dedicate all their time to producing tools and weapons for the state? This would imply a highly centralized and controlled economy. Or were they farmers first, who practiced their craft during the winter months when the fields lay fallow, creating tools for their own families or for trade? This would suggest a more decentralized system of household production. The truth may be a mix of both, with some attached to the elite and others working more independently. But what is certain is that their work formed the essential, sharp edged foundation upon which the entire society was built. The sun finally dips below the horizon, and the sharp, percussive sounds of the flint knapper's workshop fall silent. The day's labor is done. A deep, collective exhale seems to pass through the city as thousands of people turn from their work and head for home. You've had your evening meal, another simple affair, perhaps the last of the venison stew, or more likely, another comforting, familiar bowl of corn porridge. Now, with the darkness outside growing absolute, you retreat into the smoky, familiar comfort of your wattle and daub house. The city transforms. Gone are the sounds of industry and commerce, the profound silence of the countryside presses in, a silence punctuated only by the chirping of a million crickets and the occasional, distant howl of a coyote from across the river. Inside, the house is an intimate bubble of light and warmth against the vast, dark world. The central hearth, which cooked your meal, now serves as the home's social center. Your small family or kin group gathers around the low, flickering flames, their faces illuminated in soft, dancing orange light. The fire casts huge, distorted shadows that leap and sway across the curved earthen walls. This is the time of day when the community comes together not for work, but for rest and connection. There are no chores to be done, no fields to be tended. There is only the fire and each other. A quiet settles over the group, and then it is gently broken by a sound. It is music. An older man, his face a network of deep lines in the firelight, raises a long, slender instrument to his lips. It is a flute, but not a metal one. This flute was crafted from a hollowed out piece of river cane with simple finger holes burned into its length. He begins to play, and the notes that emerge are soft, breathy, and hauntingly beautiful. The melody is simple, pentatonic, and it seems to capture the melancholy of the fading day and the deep peace of the night. This is the music of Cahokia. While grander instruments, like log drums and gourd rattles, were likely used in the major public ceremonies, this simple flute is for the quiet moments. It is music for the soul, a gentle lullaby for a weary city. When the flute's last note fades into the crackle of the fire, the evening's main event begins. In a world without writing, a person's memory is the only library, and the spoken word is the only way to pass down history, morality, and entertainment. An elder, a woman with eyes that seem to hold the memory of 1,000 such nights, clears her throat and begins to speak. Her voice is low and rhythmic, and the family leans in to listen. This is storytelling time. She might be telling one of the great creation myths, the story of how the world was fished up from the primordial sea, or how the first humans emerged from a cave in the earth. Or perhaps tonight is for a lighter tale, a trickster story to make the children laugh. The hero of many of these stories is Rabbit, a small, seemingly powerless creature who consistently uses his superior wit to outsmart and humiliate larger, more dangerous animals like bear or wolf. These stories are more than just simple fables. They are clever lessons about how to navigate the social world. They teach you that strength isn't everything, that cleverness can overcome brute force, and that there are consequences for arrogance and greed. It is the Cahokian version of a sitcom and a school lesson all wrapped in one. The children's eyes are wide in the firelight, their imaginations populating the dark forest just beyond their walls with talking animals and magical beings. The sheer complexity of the society around you, its art, and its architecture makes you wonder about the depth of this oral tradition. It's a question that fascinates scholars. Linguists and historians still argue whether the Mississippians had formal epic traditions. Were there designated bards, specialists who had committed to memory epic poems that were thousands of lines long, recounting the glorious history of the chief's lineage, or the mythical founding of Cahokia itself, much like the Greek poets who recited the Iliad? Or was storytelling a more informal, communal art with a large, shared pool of stories that different people could tell in their own unique way? Without a written record, we can only guess, but the richness of the culture suggests that the stories told on nights like this were part of a vast and sophisticated oral literature. The storyteller's voice eventually grows quiet. The last embers of the rabbit's tail fade away. A sleepy silence falls over the group, the children already nodding off on their sleeping mats. The fire is carefully banked with ash to preserve the precious embers for the morning. As you settle down onto your own mat, pulling a soft deerskin over you, the old man picks up his flute again. He plays a final, simple, and impossibly gentle melody, its notes drifting out of the smoke hole and into the vast, silent, and star filled Mississippian night. It is the last sound you hear as you drift off to sleep. You lie on your woven mat in the deep, quiet dark of the wattle and daub house, the storyteller's voice and the flute's soft melody still echoing in your mind. The stories of heroes and distant lands have planted a seed in your imagination. As sleep begins to gently pull at the edges of your consciousness, your thoughts drift away from the immediate, smoky warmth of the hearth and begin to travel, following the invisible threads that tie this city to the far corners of the continent. You begin to ponder the immense network of connections that makes Cahokia what it is. Your mind travels north against the powerful current of the great river. You picture a small group of Cahokian men in a long dugout canoe, paddling for weeks, then months, up the winding river systems. They pass through the territories of dozens of other peoples, some friendly, some wary. Their journey is one of diplomacy as much as travel, a constant negotiation for safe passage. Finally, after a journey of more than 500 miles, they arrive in the cold, clear waters of the Great Lakes. Here, they trade not for food, but for the sacred red metal, the native copper that is chipped and pried from the earth. You imagine the slow, heavy journey back, the canoe now laden with this precious cargo, every paddle stroke bringing the wealth of the North closer to the heart of the city. Then your thoughts drift in the opposite direction, flowing south with the river's current. Another canoe, another epic journey. This one travels down, down, down the Mississippi until the air grows salty and the trees change, finally arriving at the warm, turquoise waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Here, the prize is not metal, but shell. Great, heavy conch and whelk shells are gathered from the coastal waters, their spiral forms holding the power and mystery of the sea. But you realize now that the journey of the shell doesn't end there. Many of those raw shells are brought all the way back to Cahokia, not to be used as is, but to be transformed. You picture a workshop not far from where you lie, dedicated entirely to this craft. You see specialists, men who have spent their lives learning the delicate art of shell working, using those tiny micro drills you saw to bore thousands of holes, creating the beads for a chief's cape. They use sandstone files to carve the thick walls of the whelk shells into ornate, circular pendants depicting warriors and cosmic symbols. Cahokia is not just a destination for luxury goods. It is a manufacturing center, a factory that imports raw materials and exports finished cultural treasures, sending them back out along the trade routes as symbols of its own power and artistry. This outward flow of influence is as important as the inward flow of goods. You think of the Ramey incised pottery you saw being made, with its distinctive swirling and angular designs. Pieces just like it have been found by archaeologists hundreds of miles from here, deep in the territories of other cultures. And it wasn't just the pots that traveled, it was the people and the ideas. Far from the city, archaeologists have found what they call Cahokian outposts, small settlements with mounds and plazas and pottery that are miniature versions of the great city. And you wonder about them. It's a question that archaeologists and historians still argue about. What were these places? Were they colonies? Groups of Cahokian pioneers sent out by the chief to control a critical river junction or a source of valuable stone? Were they missionary outposts, staffed by priests dedicated to spreading the faith of the three-tiered cosmos to the unenlightened? Or was it a more passive process where a local chief, wanting to increase his own prestige, simply adopted the powerful architectural and artistic styles of the great city to the south, the ancient equivalent of building a smaller Eiffel Tower to make your town seem more important? Whatever the answer, the implications are staggering. This city is not an island. It is the heart of a living, breathing network that covers a huge portion of the continent. The network is built of intrepid traders, bold explorers, calculating diplomats, and dedicated priests. It is a web of alliances, of tribute paid and received, of strategic intermarriages between noble families, and of shared beliefs. The copper ear spools worn by the elite, the sacred stories told by the elder, the shells carved by the artisan, the very cosmology that gives the city its shape, all of it is tied to this vast and complex web. The city breathes in the raw materials of a continent and breathes out a powerful, influential culture. Lying here in the dark, you feel the pull of those distant lands, the echoes of the mountains and the sea, and you understand that the true map of Cahokia is not marked by its palisade wall, but by the thousand-mile journeys that all lead to this, the one true center of the world. You lie in the pre-dawn stillness, your mind settling back into the here and now after its long, imaginary journey across the continent. The city feels eternal, its power absolute, its connection to the cosmos unshakable. In the rhythm of your days here, it seems as though this is how things have always been and how they will always be. The sun will rise over Woodhenge, the fields will yield their corn, and the chief will watch over it all from his throne on Monk's Mound. But as you continue to live this life, you begin to notice things, small things at first. Tiny cracks in the magnificent facade of the city, like a beautiful pot developing a hairline fracture that only the most discerning eye can see. The first sign is the land itself. You join a group heading out to gather firewood, a daily chore. But the journey is longer now. The deep, old growth forests that once crowded the edges of the city are gone. To find trees large enough for fuel or for building, you have to walk for miles. A century of voracious consumption, the tens of thousands of massive logs for the great palisade, the countless smaller posts for thousands of homes, the endless fuel for cooking and pottery fires has taken its toll. The landscape has been stripped bare. And now you see the consequences. When the summer thunderstorms roll in, the rain comes down not on a spongy forest floor, but on exposed, hard packed earth. The water has nowhere to go. You witness a flash flood tear through an outlying neighborhood, a brown, muddy torrent that sweeps away gardens and damages homes. The elders in your community murmur that the floods are more frequent and more violent than they were in their youth. The great river, the city's lifeblood, seems to have grown angrier, its banks eroding, its channels shifting unpredictably. Then you notice the wall. The great palisade is being rebuilt again. A massive undertaking is underway, with teams of men felling the scarce timber from miles away and hauling the huge logs back to the city. But this time, the construction doesn't feel like a confident expression of power. It feels desperate. The constant need to maintain and reinforce this massive defensive wall hints at a growing, persistent fear. Is it fear of an external enemy, a coalition of rival towns who have grown weary of Cahokia's dominance? Or is it an internal fear, a need for the elites to further separate themselves from a growingly stressed and perhaps restless population? Either way, the mood surrounding the construction is one of anxiety, not strength. You look more closely at the people around you, your neighbors, the people you work with in the fields. There is a weariness that seems to run deeper than simple fatigue from a hard day's work. You see more people who are thin, whose bodies lack the robust strength you once saw. Analysis of skeletal remains from this later period confirms your quiet observation, showing higher rates of anemia, malnutrition, and infectious diseases like tuberculosis. The city's very success may have become its greatest vulnerability. The population has grown so dense that diseases can spread like wildfire through the crowded neighborhoods. The heavy reliance on a corn based diet, which once fueled the city's rise, is now taking its toll, lacking the complete nutrition needed for a truly healthy population. The city is big, but it is becoming brittle. All these cracks in the foundation, the angry river, the denuded forests, the ever present wall, the sickness in the people, lead to a terrifying question. Why is this happening? What has gone wrong? It is the great mystery of Cahokia, the question that historians, archaeologists, and climate scientists still argue about. What was the primary engine of the city's decline? Was it relentless external warfare, a slow bleeding of the city's resources and manpower against a tide of rising enemies? Was it a catastrophic internal collapse, a crisis of faith when a series of droughts or floods made the people lose faith in the chief's ability to maintain cosmic balance? Or was it a slow, self inflicted environmental death, a tragic feedback loop where deforestation led to erosion and flooding, which damaged the crops, which in turn led to hunger and social unrest? The truth is likely not one single cause, but a perfect, devastating storm of all of them combined. The feeling in the city has changed. The air of confident destiny you felt at the Chunky game has been replaced by a low hum of anxiety. You look up at Monk's Mound, at the seat of the divine ruler who is supposed to keep the universe in balance. You can now feel the crushing weight of the burden he carries. The spirits of the lower world seem to be ascendant, and the power of the upper world seems distant and unreliable. The great city of Cahokia, the center of the world, for the first time in centuries, feels profoundly, terribly vulnerable. The feeling of vulnerability, you noticed, has now settled over the city like a permanent, dreary fog. The cracks in the foundation are no longer subtle, they are widening into chasms, and the great city is beginning to crumble, not with a sudden, violent crash, but with a slow, agonizing, and quiet sigh. The decline of Cahokia is not a single event. It is a process, a long, drawn out unraveling that you are now witnessing day by day. The most undeniable sign is the silence. You walk through your own neighborhood, the one that was once so full of the sounds of life, of children shouting, dogs barking, and the constant murmur of voices. Now there are pockets of profound quiet. You pass by a house that just a season ago was home to a family you knew. Now its doorway is a dark, empty mouth. The hearth inside is cold, its ashes washed away by the rain coming through the slowly decaying thatched roof. The small garden patch out front is overgrown with weeds. The family didn't die, they just left. One morning, they simply packed their few belongings, their baskets, and their tools, and walked away. Then you notice another house and another standing empty and silent. It is not a panicked flight, not a mass exodus. It is a slow, steady draining of people, a quiet abandonment, family by family. This is the way the city dies. The historical and archaeological records show that Cahokia's end was not a dramatic collapse, but a gradual decline that stretched over 150 years. From its peak around 1200 AD, the population began to slowly but surely dwindle until by 1350 the city was all but empty. The immense magnetic force that had once pulled people in from every corner of the continent had reversed itself. Now, the city was pushing people away. They were voting with their feet, making a conscious choice that a better life, a safer life, was to be found somewhere else. The most haunting part of this decline is the lack of a single, obvious cause. There is no great mystery to solve, no culprit to blame. Archaeologists have sifted through the soil for generations, and they have found no evidence of a final, catastrophic event. There is no thick layer of ash and charcoal across the city to suggest it was consumed by a great, city ending fire. The palisade walls show signs of repair, but not of a final, climactic battle where the city was overrun by invaders. And there are no vast plague pits, no mass graves from the final centuries to suggest a single, devastating epidemic wiped everyone out. The city wasn't murdered. It seems to have simply died of natural causes, its great heart slowly giving out. From your vantage point, living among the last inhabitants, you understand the logic of leaving. The promises the city once made are no longer being kept. The soil, overworked for centuries, is less fertile now, the corn harvests less reliable, the floods that sweep through the low lying areas are more frequent and destructive. Sickness seems to linger longer in the crowded quarters, and the demands of the chief and the elite, the tribute of food and labor required to maintain the mounds and the rituals, feel heavier and more oppressive when the rewards of city life are so thin. The social contract has been broken. The great urban experiment is failing, leaving for a smaller, more self sufficient village in a nearby valley is starting to seem like the most sensible choice a person can make. But where do they all go? As you watch another family walk away down a path leading out of the city, you wonder about their destination. It's a question that archaeologists and anthropologists still argue about. What became of the Cahokian people? Did they migrate as large, cohesive groups, traveling west or south to found new communities that would over centuries become the historical tribes we know today? The Osage, the Ponca, the Quapaw are the stories of a great city of mounds that some of these tribes told to early European explorers, a distant, fading memory of this very place? Or did the population simply disperse, melting back into the landscape from which it came, breaking up into small kin groups to resettle the American bottom in dozens of smaller, more sustainable villages, returning to the way of life their ancestors knew before the dream of a great metropolis ever began? The great city may just be dissolving, its people spreading like seeds on the wind. The physical decay is everywhere now. The flint knapper's workshop is silent, the ground no longer littered with fresh, sharp flakes. The vast fields of corn have shrunk, the outer plots now overgrown with prairie grass and saplings. Nature is patiently, inexorably reclaiming its territory. You walk through the Grand Plaza, and it is no longer immaculately clean. Wind-blown leaves and dirt have begun to accumulate in the corners. The Great Palisade is no longer being repaired. In some sections, the massive logs have started to rot at their base, leaning at drunken angles or collapsing altogether, creating gaps in the once impenetrable wall. The city is losing its long war against entropy. Even the elite are giving up. You look at the smaller mounds and see that some of the grand houses that sat atop them are now derelict, their roofs caving in, their walls crumbling. The chief still resides on Monk's Mound, a lonely king ruling over a dwindling kingdom of ghosts. The last family has gone. You watch them leave this morning, a small, sad procession walking away from the city without looking back. The smoke from their hearth was the last plume of smoke you will ever see rise from a Cahokian home. An unearthly quiet has now fallen over the city, a silence that is deeper and more profound than the simple quiet of the night. It is the silence of absence, the constant, low-frequency hum of human life, a sound you never noticed until it was gone, has ceased. All you can hear now is the whisper of the wind through the tall prairie grass and the lonely call of a hawk circling high overhead. The city has become a ghost of itself. You wander through the empty streets, a solitary spirit in a dead metropolis. You pass by the house where you took shelter, where you listened to the stories by the fire. The roof, no longer maintained, has begun to collapse inward. A young sapling, a pioneer from the resurgent forest, is already pushing its way up through the floor where the central hearth once warmed the family. The narrow paths of the neighborhood are disappearing, being reclaimed by a soft carpet of green. The wattle and daub walls of the houses, no longer protected by fresh coats of clay, are slowly melting back into the earth from which they came, worn down by the rain and the wind. You walk to the edge of the central precinct and find the skeletal remains of the great palisade. Most of the massive posts have rotted through at their base and toppled over, half buried in the soil like the ribs of some colossal, long dead beast. A few of the sturdiest logs still stand, leaning at odd angles, a broken fence that no longer protects anything from anything. You pass through one of the gaps where a gate once stood, the ground no longer packed down by the thousands of feet that once passed through it each day. You make your way to the circle of Woodhenge. The sacred red cedar posts now lie scattered on the ground like giant pickup sticks, slowly decaying. The precise astronomical alignments are lost. The sun still rises over the designated spot on the solstice, but there is no one left to witness it, no priest to announce the turning of the season. The great cosmic clock has finally stopped ticking. You find yourself standing in the middle of the immense Grand Plaza. This vast, engineered space, once kept so immaculately clean by a dedicated workforce, is now surrendering to nature. Wind-blown seeds have found purchase in the packed clay, and patches of grass and wildflowers are pushing their way up, creating a wild, unkempt meadow where a great stage once lay. There is a quiet, hidden irony here. The incredible effort the Cahokians took to scrape this plaza flat and cap it with layers of dense clay had an unintended consequence for the future. By sealing the ground beneath, they created a nearly oxygen-free environment, a perfect time capsule. The clay floor that was designed to erase the messiness of nature ended up preserving a perfect record of it, trapping the pollen, seeds, and microscopic debris of the city's golden age for archaeologists to discover a millennium later. The surface built for forgetting became the city's most faithful diary. The only things that still truly resist the tide of decay are the mounds themselves. They are simply too massive, too dense to erode quickly. But even they are changing. The sharp, geometric corners of their terraces are softening, their slopes blurring. Grasses have taken hold everywhere, and now small shrubs and trees are beginning to sprout on their sides. Slowly, inexorably, they are beginning to look less like man-made monuments and more like natural hills, their cultural purpose being slowly cloaked and forgotten under a patient blanket of green. You look up at the summit of Monk's Mound, at the empty space where the great chief's residence once stood, and you wonder about the very last moments. It's a question historians and archaeologists still argue about. How did it finally end? Was there a formal ceremony, a ritual where the last priests and nobles decommissioned the sacred sites, extinguishing the eternal flame and putting the city to sleep before they departed? Or was the end much quieter, much sadder? Did the very last person to live here simply wake up one morning, Look out at the silent mounds and the empty houses and walk away without a word, leaving the door open for the wind to be the city's final occupant. The abandonment was so complete, so total, that within a few short centuries, the memory of this place vanished from the earth. When the first European explorers arrived in this part of the world, they saw the great, mysterious mounds, but the local tribes, including the one that gave the site its modern name, the Cahokia, had no idea who had built them. The story of the greatest city in North America had been lost to time, attributed to a mythical race of giants or to the gods themselves. You stand on the banks of the Mississippi, the great river that was once the city's highway to an entire continent. Now, it is just a river, its brown water flowing silently past a city of green hills and profound, unending silence. You stand on the silent riverbank, the ghost city behind you, a landscape of soft green hills that were once a bustling metropolis. The physical city is gone, its people scattered, its name forgotten for 1,000 years. It would be easy to think that this is the end of the story, that everything that was Cahokia simply vanished into the earth. But a city is more than its buildings and its walls. A city is a collection of ideas, and ideas are much harder to kill than wood and clay. As you stand here on the edge of sleep, you can feel the faint, enduring legacy of this place rippling outwards through time. The people who walked away from Cahokia did not wipe their minds clean. They carried their world within them. They carried the knowledge of how to plant the three sisters, the skill of crafting a pot without a wheel, and the memory of the three-tiered cosmos. Centuries later, when French explorers traveled up the Mississippi, they encountered tribes like the Natchez, and in their culture, the explorers saw a clear and startling echo of the great city. The Natchez were ruled by a paramount chief they called the Great Sun, who was believed to be a direct descendant of the sun deity. He lived separately, on top of a man made mound, and wielded absolute authority over a complex, stratified society of nobles and commoners. The software of Cahokia had survived, rebooted in a new time and place. The great city was gone, but the Mississippian way of life, the core ideas of its religion and its politics, lived on. And certain powerful symbols had an even more tenacious grip on the human imagination. You think of the Birdman, the divine falcon warrior, the ultimate symbol of elite power and spiritual connection that you saw on the burial cape in Mound 72. That image did not die here. For the next 400 years, long after Cahokia was a forgotten ruin, that same figure appears again and again, etched onto shell pendants and embossed onto copper plates in the graves of high status individuals from Alabama to Oklahoma to Florida. The symbol was so potent, so universally understood as a mark of power and divinity, that it detached from its original source and became a freelance icon, a piece of cultural DNA that was passed down and replicated across the entire Southeast. But how direct was this line of inheritance? It's a complex question, and historians and archaeologists still argue about how to draw the lines of descent from the people of Cahokia. Can we point to a specific historic tribe, like the Osage or the Quapaw, and say that their chiefs are the direct, linear heirs of the rulers who once sat atop Monk's Mound? Or was the legacy more like a river delta, branching and braiding into countless smaller streams? As the Cahokians dispersed, they would have met and mingled with other groups, their ideas blending with local traditions, creating new, hybrid cultures that carried elements of the great city but were not exact copies. The legacy of Cahokia might not be a single straight road, but a beautiful and complex web of influence that is woven into the heritage of dozens of modern Native American nations. Centuries pass in the blink of an eye. The mounds have softened into gentle green hills. The memory of the city is completely erased from the minds of the living. New people arrive in this valley, American settlers who plow the rich floodplain. They see the great mounds and cannot believe that the ancestors of the native people living nearby could have built them. They invent stories of a lost race of Vikings, or Welshmen, or Israelites to explain away the evidence before their eyes. It is only through the slow, patient work of modern archaeology, the careful sifting of the soil, the analysis of a million tiny clues, that the ghost city finally begins to speak again. The empty houses and the silent graves give up their secrets, and the story of the great, forgotten metropolis is pieced back together, shard by shard. And now your own journey is ending. The story is told. You can feel the history of this place settling back into the earth, the energy of the bustling market, the roar of the chunky crowd, the quiet chanting of the shaman, all fading, becoming one with the deep, slow rhythm of the land. The great mounds are just hills once more, dreaming under a canopy of stars. It is time to let the silence have the final word. The last echoes of the city are fading now, softening at the edges, dissolving into the quiet hum of the night. The great grassy mounds are sinking back into a deep and peaceful sleep, their long watch finally over, and you can feel yourself drifting with them, letting go of the sights and the sounds, letting go of the story. The path you walked through the ancient city now becomes a path into your own deepest rest, a soft and easy trail into slumber. There is nothing left to see, nothing left to wonder about. There is only the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your own breathing, a quiet tide pulling you further and further away into the calm and silent dark. The city is gone. The night is peaceful, and it is time now to simply sleep. Just let your mind go quiet and let the deep, dreamless rest come to find you. The journey is over. Let it all go.